The award dinner felt like a slow-motion public execution. Karen, accepting her city council honor, didn't even glance my way when she thanked supportive friends and colleagues, leaving me a silent, invisible fixture at our table. The cold air from the open doors bit into my face, and I knew in that gut-wrenching moment, she was already gone. "You're still young," her father had once told me. "You need a reliable man." The garage door groaned open, a familiar mechanical sigh as I pulled my Ford pickup into its usual spot. The house stood quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavier than usual. I stepped inside, the click of the lock echoing in the stillness. On the kitchen counter, next to a half-empty coffee mug, was a small, cream-colored note. "Working late. Meeting ran over. Don't wait up. Love, Kay." The letters were neat, impersonal. There was no cookie, no small doodle like she used to draw. Cookie was a name from another life, it felt like, from the early days when our notes had been tucked into lunch bags, scrawled on steamy bathroom mirrors or left on my pillow, always with a hint of genuine affection. Now the notes were functional, almost sterile, delivered from a distance that seemed to widen with each passing year. The warmth had thinned out, like butter spread too thin on toast, leaving behind a cold, crisp surface. Karen's career as a realtor had taken off, soaring past the initial struggle, and her role on the city council had made her a local fixture, the kind of woman whose name appeared regularly in the Sunday paper. I was proud of her, genuinely. Her drive was something to behold, but it also meant her calendar was a battlefield of appointments and meetings, dinner engagements, and late-night calls. She was always on, always connected to the next client, the next constituent, the next cause. There was little room left for anything else, certainly not for me, it seemed. Sometimes her voice on the phone would carry a slight edge when I asked about her day, a dismissive tone that suggested my inquiries were trivial, a distraction from her important work. It was a subtle shift, not outright unkindness, but a quiet condescension that settled like dust. I'd catch her looking at me across the dinner table, if we even managed to eat together, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, a flicker of something that wasn't affection. The thought had been a dark, unwelcome shadow, creeping in at the edges of my mind for months now. Fair. I'd tried to shake it off, to dismiss it as the insecurity of a man whose wife was simply too successful, too busy. But the evidence, small and persistent, had begun to accumulate. The late nights that turned into early mornings, the new phone she kept closer than her own skin, the vague answers about where she'd been, the perfume that sometimes smelled unfamiliar. Not her usual scent. It built up like static electricity, a hum beneath the surface of our quiet house. I went outside, pulling the old lawnmower from the shed. The sun was still high, casting long shadows across the uncut grass. The roar of the engine was a welcome distraction, a physical vibration that pushed against the knot in my stomach. Back and forth, the blades chopped, the smell of fresh-cut grass sharp and clean. With each pass, the chaotic thoughts in my head began to organize themselves, falling into a logical sequence like a troubleshooting flowchart. I was a network engineer. My job was to find the fault, isolate it, and fix it. This, I decided, was a system diagnostic. Electronic surveillance had crossed my mind, installing cameras, monitoring her phone. But Karen's schedule was too erratic, her movements too unpredictable. And honestly, the idea of becoming a digital stalker in my own home felt wrong. It was too invasive, too close to the line, and likely inefficient given my limited expertise in such matters. No, a professional was needed. Someone detached, someone with the tools and the know-how. A private detective. The idea solidified, a cold, hard fact. It would be expensive, certainly, but the cost of not knowing, the cost of this gnawing uncertainty, felt far greater. That evening, after Karen's car was still absent from the driveway, I fired up my old laptop. I typed Private Investigator Midwest into the search bar. Pages loaded, a mix of slick websites and grainy local ads. One result caught my eye, a local news story from Channel 9, profiling a few area PIs and discussing their methods. As I watched the short clip, a face flashed on screen, then disappeared. Brenda Miller. Brenda and I had shared a few classes at the university, way back when. She'd been sharp, ambitious even then, always asking the pointed questions. She was the news director at Channel 9 now. It was a long shot, but she might know who was reliable, discreet. The next morning, I called the station. Her assistant put me through. Hank Olson? Wow, blast from the past, Brenda said, her voice still carrying that no-nonsense energy. What can I do for you, stranger? I mumbled something about catching up, maybe a beer sometime. She suggested Thursday, over two lukewarm drafts at O'Malley's. After we'd covered the superficial ground of careers and kids, I eased into it. Brenda, I started, lowering my voice. I was watching that piece you guys did on private investigators. I've got a situation. Need some advice. She looked at me, her eyes unblinking. Karen, isn't it? She said, not a question, more of a statement. I just nodded, a small, involuntary twitch of my head. Brenda took a slow sip of her beer. Yeah, I figured. Listen, stay away from the big agencies, the ones with the flashy ads. They'll just run up the bill. And avoid the one-man shows, too. They get overwhelmed, or worse, they get lazy. She leaned forward slightly. There's an agency called Masterson. Good people. A husband and wife team, actually. Very thorough, very discreet. A bit pricier, maybe, but they don't mess around. If there's something to find, they'll find it. The Masterson agency occupied a quiet office on the second floor of a brick building downtown, its frosted glass door bearing a discreet gold stencil. Inside, the space was plain, functional. A woman, her hair pulled back tightly, nodded me toward a door labeled Peterson. Mr. Peterson sat behind a large, uncluttered desk. He was a man in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with a face that held the imprint of countless late nights and unspoken stories. His eyes, a soft blue, seemed perpetually tired, but they held an honesty that put me slightly at ease. He gestured toward a chair. Mr. Olson, he said, his voice a low rumble. Brenda said you might be calling. I laid out my case, the pieces of Karen's changed behavior, the late nights, the vague answers, the unsettling feeling that had burrowed into my gut. I tried to keep my voice even, factual, like I was debugging a network issue. When I finished, Mr. Peterson leaned back, his gaze steady. It sounds like a difficult situation, Mr. Olson, he began. But I've seen a lot of marriages where busy careers, especially in public life, cause strain. People get distant. Doesn't always mean there's another person. He paused, letting the silence hang. We can look into it, of course, but I'd caution you against jumping to conclusions based on what might just be a tired, strained marriage. He proposed a 3-week initial investigation. We'll establish her pattern, he explained, who she's meeting, where she's going, the general schedule. Get some solid facts. If there's something more, we'll find it. It sounded logical, precise, like the network diagnostics I ran. A part of me, a small, stubborn part, hoped they would find nothing, that his initial skepticism was correct. Another part, the one that had been churning with suspicion for months, dreaded the confirmation. I agreed, pulling out my checkbook. The retainer felt heavy in my hand, a down payment on either peace of mind or crushing confirmation. I left the office, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights following me to the street. The next 3 weeks stretched into an eternity. Every time Karen's car wasn't in the driveway, every unanswered call, every late meeting text felt magnified. I watched her, subtly, trying to find clues, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman I suspected. She seemed more distant, often lost in thought, her phone a constant companion. Sometimes a burst of laughter from her in another room would catch me off guard, and for a moment I would feel a pang of longing for the way things used to be, for a shared ease that was now gone. Then the doubt would creep back in, a cold finger tracing lines of suspicion across my mind. I felt like a hypocrite, living under the same roof, sharing meals, yet harboring this growing, secret inquiry into her life. On the 21st day the phone rang. It was Mr. Peterson. Mr. Olson, we have a preliminary report. Can you come in this afternoon? His voice was flat, professional. It gave nothing away. The office felt colder this time. Mr. Peterson sat opposite me, a manila folder open on his desk. He pushed a stack of photos across to me. This is David, he stated, his finger tapping one image. David Reynolds. Karen's campaign manager. He's been with her on all her public appearances for the last year. The first few photos were innocuous enough. Karen and David entering City Hall, shaking hands with constituents, smiling for a camera. Then the sequence shifted. Karen and David leaving a restaurant late at night, a hand lingering on her elbow. Karen's head tilted toward his as they walked. They were clear, detailed. The next set showed them entering an apartment building. David's apartment, Mr. Peterson clarified, giving me the address. There were photos of them leaving in the early hours of the morning, Karen's hair slightly disheveled, a familiar scarf wrapped around her neck. In one, David's hand rested on her lower back as they stepped out, a possessive, tender gesture that tore through me. It was all there, laid out in undeniable black and white. Not just a strained marriage, not just busy schedules. It was David. My stomach clenched, a cold, hard knot. The sense of betrayal was not a flash of anger, but a slow, crushing realization of how deeply entangled our lives were, how many threads would have to be unraveled. The images in the folder were not just pictures. They were fragments of a life I thought was mine, now twisted and broken. I nodded, unable to speak, the words caught in my throat. Mr. Peterson slid a final invoice across the desk. The remainder is $2,700, Mr. Olson. I pulled out my checkbook again, the transaction feeling as cold and transactional as the state of my marriage now felt. There was no emotion in his eyes, just the quiet professionalism of a man who had seen this scene countless times before. I drove home, the late afternoon sun painting long shadows across the streets. The house, when I pulled into the driveway, felt like a tomb. Each window was a dark, vacant eye. I walked inside, the silence amplifying the echo of the photographs in my mind. The image of David's hand on Karen's back, a cruel, indelible mark. The images of Karen and David, caught in the unflattering glare of the camera flash, became a persistent loop in my head. David's hand on her back, the way her head tilted towards his, the quiet intimacy of two people leaving an apartment in the early morning. Each replay was a fresh sting, a cruel reminder of what had been happening behind my back, in the shadow of our shared life. The knowledge felt like a physical weight pressing down, making it hard to breathe. I debated my next move. Should I confront her immediately, unleash the anger and hurt that churned inside me? Or should I approach this more strategically, quietly prepare for a divorce, gather my resources, and then deliver the blow? The emotional side of me craved the release of a shouting match, the satisfaction of seeing her face crumple under the weight of her deceit. But the logical engineering part of my brain, the part that always sought the most efficient solution, argued for a more calculated approach. This wasn't just about emotions. It was about the dismantling of a shared life, about assets, and about a future that now looked entirely different. I started researching divorce lawyers online late at night under the dim glow of my laptop screen. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, the cost estimates dizzying. Karen's public profile added another layer of complexity. She was a known entity, a respected figure in the community. This wouldn't be a quiet affair. A messy public divorce would be exactly the kind of scandal her opponents would relish. Then there were the financial implications. Our house, our savings, the investments we had made together over 15 years, half of everything. The thought of untangling it all, of fighting over furniture and bank accounts, was a heavy burden. Imagining a life without Karen was difficult, not just emotionally, but practically. Our routines, our shared friends, even the way the house was organized, everything was intertwined with her presence. The thought of dismantling all of that, of erasing our shared history, felt daunting, like trying to unknit a tightly woven tapestry, thread by thread. But then the anger would surge, a hot wave that washed away the practical considerations. The sheer audacity of her deceit, the casual lies she had fed me, the way she had lived a double life under my very roof. That anger pushed me toward confrontation. She needed to be held accountable. I deserved an explanation. I decided on a hybrid approach. I would act rationally first, securing my own position, and then, only then, would I confront her. This wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about reclaiming some control, some dignity, in a situation where I felt utterly powerless. The first step was financial. Over the next few days, I discreetly began transferring small amounts of money from our joint accounts to a new separate account I opened online. It felt like a petty, almost rebellious act, but it was also a necessary one, a small act of self-preservation in the face of what was to come. I also started making a mental list of personal items, things that truly mattered to me, things I would want to ensure were mine. I watched Karen more closely now. Her forced cheerfulness after a late meeting, the way her eyes would dart away when I asked a pointed question about her evening. Each small lie, each subtle evasion, was no longer just a vague suspicion, but a fresh, sharp sting. She would tell me she was with clients or at a campaign event, her voice light and unconcerned, and I would nod, feigning ignorance, knowing the truth. The house, our home, now felt like a stage, and I was just an unwitting actor in a play I hadn't agreed to. I felt like a stranger, a silent observer of a life that was no longer mine, a ghost haunting my own living room. The day I chose for the confrontation was a Tuesday. Karen had a city council meeting scheduled for that evening. She would be home late, tired, likely looking forward to a quiet night. It felt like the right moment, a way to catch her off guard, to ensure she couldn't escape the discussion easily. A strange mix of dread and resolve settled in my chest. Dread for the inevitable explosion, the pain that would be unleashed. Resolve because I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that my life, our life, was about to irrevocably change. There was no going back from this. That afternoon, I gathered the evidence, the envelope with the photos from Mr. Peterson. The cold, irrefutable proof. I laid them out on the dining room table, arranging them in the order I wanted to present them, like an exhibit in a courtroom. The weight of them felt immense, each glossy print a testament to the shattered trust, the broken vows. The moment was pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. The glow of the living room lamp cast long shadows as I waited. Every tick of the clock felt amplified, each passing minute drawing me closer to the edge. The house, usually a comfort, now felt like a poem, holding me hostage to this moment. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a bug, all normal sounds, yet they grated on my nerves. Then, the familiar crunch of tires on the driveway, the soft thud of a car door, the jingle of keys. Karen walked in, her purse slung over her shoulder, a stack of papers tucked under her arm. She looked tired, a slight flush on her cheeks from the cold evening air, but otherwise completely oblivious. "Rough meeting?" I asked, my voice sounding unnaturally steady in my own ears. She jumped slightly, clearly not expecting me to still be up. "Hank, you're still awake?" "Yeah, another endless debate about zoning. What are you doing up?" "We need to talk," I said, my gaze unwavering. She paused, sensing something in my tone. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of caution replacing her initial weariness. I walked over to the dining room table where I had laid out the photos face down. With a deliberate motion, I turned them over one by one. The first showed her and David leaving his apartment in the dim pre-dawn light. The second, his hand on her lower back. The third, a close-up of their faces. A shared, intimate smile. Her eyes flicked from the photos to my face, then back to the glossy prints. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin pale and waxy under the lamplight. "Hank, what is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You know what this is, Karen," I replied, the words clipped, precise. "It's David, and it's you, leaving his apartment at 4 in the morning." She started to stammer. "No, it's not what it looks like." The denial was weak, unconvincing. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, for a plausible lie. But the photographs held their ground. Her gaze finally settled on the table, her shoulders slumping. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "Okay, Hank. Okay, you are right." Her voice broke. "It's true. I'm so sorry." She began to cry, raw, breathless sobs. "It was a mistake, Hank. A terrible, stupid mistake. Things have been so hard, with the council, the job. I felt so alone. You were always so busy with your projects, and I needed someone." She tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away. Needed someone? I repeated, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to keep it level. You chose someone, Karen. You chose to lie, night after night, for months. You chose to betray everything we built. Don't try to blame your busy life or my supposed distance. Those were your choices, your actions. Her tears stopped abruptly, replaced by a flash of anger. You spied on me, Hank? You hired someone to follow me? After all these years, after everything we've been through, you betrayed my trust like that? Her voice was laced with a venom I hadn't heard in years. Betrayed your trust? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Hypocrite, you want to talk about betrayal of trust? What about our marriage vows, Karen? For better or worse, remember that? You betrayed that. You betrayed me. Cornered, her guilt seemed to curdle into aggression. Oh, so you're perfect, are you? Always so logical, so rational. Never a misstep, never a bad decision. Don't pretend you're a saint, Hank. This isn't just on me. She stood up, pacing agitatedly. And it wasn't serious. It was just a way to cope, a distraction, a relief from the pressure. She waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. The casual dismissal of the affair, her attempt to minimize it as mere stress relief, felt like a fresh cut. It wasn't just the betrayal that crushed me, but the casual way she diminished our shared history, our 15 years together, with such a thoughtless explanation. A distraction, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. Is that what I was, Karen? The boring husband you had to escape from? I looked at her, truly looked at her, and the woman I saw now was a stranger. The last vestiges of my affection, the lingering hope that this could be salvaged, evaporated. It's over, Karen, I said, my voice quiet now, but firm, unwavering. I'm filing for divorce. I want the house, and I want an equitable division of assets. You can keep your reputation and your city council seat. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, the anger in her eyes replaced by a stunned, disbelieving look. Divorce, Hank? No. You can't be serious. We can work through this. People make mistakes. Please, Hank, let's talk about this. She reached for me again, her hand outstretched. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, stepping back. My resolve was a cold, hard stone in my chest. It's done. The news traveled fast in our town, especially when it involved someone like Karen. Her name, already a regular feature in the local paper, now carried a new hushed weight. The whispers started almost immediately. I heard it first at the grocery store, then from a colleague at work. Heard about you and Karen, Hank? Shame. The way their eyes would linger, full of a strange mix of pity and avid curiosity, made my skin crawl. Karen's political opponents, ever opportunistic, weren't subtle. They didn't outright declare her affair, not yet, but the rumors they circulated were precise, targeted. Questions about her judgment, her dedication, her personal life impacting public service began appearing on local forums, thinly veiled references that everyone understood. It was a slow drip, designed to corrode. A few days after the confrontation, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Mr. Olson, this is Rebecca Shaw from the Midwest Chronicle. We're hearing rumors about you and your wife. Any comment on the impending divorce? The call put me on edge, a stark reminder that this wasn't just a private tragedy anymore. This was public spectacle. I started avoiding places I used to frequent, the diner where I got my morning coffee, the hardware store, even my usual running route. I felt eyes on me everywhere, imagined hushed conversations dying down as I approached. This was the small-town judgment Brenda had warned me about, the collective gaze that analyzed every move, every expression. It made the air feel thick, suffocating. Karen, meanwhile, was clearly in damage control mode. Her public appearances became more frequent, her smile a little too bright, her voice a little too earnest. I knew she was reaching out, desperately trying to control the narrative before it spiraled. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd called Stan Davies, a well-known PR expert, a family friend from way back. Stan, I knew, was a master of spin. His advice, I imagined, would be to frame this as a personal setback, a tough time for a dedicated public servant, nothing more. To paint me, perhaps, as the unsupportive, cold husband. My lawyer, a stoic woman named Eleanor Vance, advised a different strategy. Say nothing, Hank, she'd instructed, her voice calm and steady. Let her do all the talking. Every word she utters in public, every excuse, every attempt to deflect, will only dig her a deeper hole. Silence is your best weapon right now. It was a cold, calculated tactic, but it resonated with the cold reality of our situation. The divorce proceedings officially began. Papers were filed, motions made. It was all procedural, a slow grinding of the legal machinery, but each document, each date stamped on a form, felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. It was going to be a long, drawn-out battle, a war of attrition. The affair with David, once a carefully guarded secret, was now an open one. David, her campaign manager, a man who had been a rising star in local politics, found himself facing the brunt of the fallout. I heard he'd been quietly let go from his consulting firm, his phone calls to potential clients going unanswered. He was ostracized, the kind of social shame that sticks to you in a place like ours. Seeing his career, his reputation, crumbling alongside Karen's gave me a perverse sense of satisfaction. It was a tangible consequence, a public reckoning for their private betrayal. I watched the public's fickle nature unfold, their quick judgments, the way they built up a person only to tear them down with equal fervor. Karen, so poised, so self-assured, was visibly struggling to maintain her composure. Her usually flawless public persona was starting to fray at the edges, small cracks appearing in the facade. Seeing her carefully constructed world begin to crumble, seeing the strain behind her eyes, provided a strange, bitter sense of vindication. Yet, beneath that, a deep, persistent sadness lingered. It was a mourning not for Karen the betrayer, but for the life we had once shared, for the young woman I had married, for the plans and dreams that now lay in ruins. The satisfaction felt thin, momentary. The loss, however, was profound and permanent. Life's costly choices unfold in unexpected ways, changing not only the path ahead, but the ground beneath your feet. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The legal dance began, a slow, methodical grind that quickly felt like its own form of warfare. Karen's lawyer, a slick, aggressive man named Mr. Harrington, immediately went on the offensive. He argued that my hiring of a private investigator was an invasion of privacy, a desperate act of a jealous husband, and therefore the evidence gathered was irrelevant to any financial settlement or spousal support discussions. He painted it as a vindictive move, designed to humiliate Karen, not to uncover truth. Eleanor Vance, my lawyer, met his arguments with a calm, unwavering resolve. Infidelity absolutely impacts spousal support in the division of assets, especially in a case where the infidelity has become a matter of public knowledge, she stated, her voice even. She meticulously laid out the legal precedents, highlighting how Karen's public role amplified the impact of her actions on our shared marital estate. The affair wasn't just a private matter anymore. It was a public scandal, directly affecting Karen's earning potential and public trust. As the legal teams delved deeper into our finances, the cold, hard numbers began to paint their own picture. Discrepancies emerged, small sums that didn't quite add up, a few hidden accounts that Karen had subtly established. Nothing grand, but enough to confirm her systematic deceit. It was another layer of betrayal, a quiet financial pilfering and alongside the emotional one. Karen's legal strategy became increasingly aggressive. Mr. Harrington began trying to discredit my character, to poke holes in my professional reputation. He alleged I was cold, unsupportive, emotionally distant, implying I had driven Karen to seek comfort elsewhere. He even tried to suggest I was financially irresponsible, subtly questioning my engineering judgment. It was a predictable tactic, designed to muddy the waters and shift blame, but it still chafed. I felt the pressure mount, a knot tightening in my stomach with each new accusation. How far was I willing to go to win this? Was my pursuit of justice morphing into something uglier, something closer to revenge? I found myself replaying our last confrontation, her tears, her defiant anger. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, to face the consequences, but at what cost to myself, to my own sense of what was right? The financial strain of the divorce was becoming all too real. The legal fees mounted rapidly, thick envelopes arriving weekly, each bill a stark reminder of the escalating cost of this fractured life. It felt like I was paying to dismantle my own history, brick by expensive brick. One evening, staring at the full PI report, the detailed notes and surveillance logs, a thought surfaced. What if I leaked all of it? Sent it anonymously to the Midwest Chronicle, let them publish the whole sordid story, every detail of Karen and David's escapades. It would utterly destroy her. Her political career would be over, her reputation in tatters, a cautionary tale. It was a tempting thought, a way to inflict the pain she had inflicted on me, to ensure she felt the full weight of the public scorn. I brought it up to Eleanor. She listened, her expression unreadable. Hank, legally, that's a minefield. You could face libel charges, invasion of privacy lawsuits. Even if the information is true, the way it's disseminated could put you at significant legal risk. And ethically, well, that's a line you'd have to draw for yourself. Her words, calm and professional, cut through the anger. I wrestled with it for a few days. The desire for vengeance, for her complete downfall, was strong, but the thought of sinking to that level, of becoming as deceitful and underhanded as she had been, left a bitter taste. It wouldn't make me feel better. Not really. It would just make me complicit in a different kind of ugliness. A moment of clarity arrived, not as a sudden flash, but as a quiet internal settling. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted fairness, a clean break, and the ability to move on. I called Eleanor. Eleanor, I said, I've thought about it. No leaks. Let's focus on a fair settlement. I want what's equitable, what I'm entitled to. No character assassination, unless absolutely necessary for our legal position. She simply replied, understood, Hank. That's a wise decision. The public sentiment, driven by Karen's defensive maneuvers and the lingering rumors, had indeed turned against her. Her once unwavering public support was faltering. A few days later, Eleanor called me. Karen's lawyer has made a conciliatory offer for settlement, she stated. It's not perfect, but it's a significant shift. Looks like she's ready to compromise. The finalization of the divorce felt strangely anticlimactic. No dramatic courtroom scenes, no last-minute reversals. Just the dry rustle of legal papers, the exchange of signatures, and a judge's terse pronouncement. It was over. 15 years, reduced to a stack of documents in a cold, sterile end. The house was legally mine, the assets divided, the separation officially sanctioned. A few days later, I moved out. I took only what was truly mine, things I couldn't bear to leave behind. My old guitar, a box of books, some framed photos of my family from before Karen, a worn leather journal. The house, stripped of my presence, felt empty and hollow, a shell of the life it once held. I paused at the front door, looking back at the familiar living room, the quiet kitchen, places where laughter and quiet conversations once lived. Now only echoes remained. News filtered in about Karen. Faced with mounting public pressure, whispers during council meetings, and a clear erosion of her support base, she announced her resignation from the city council. The press release cited personal reasons and a desire to focus on family, but everyone knew the real story. Her carefully constructed public image, once her greatest asset, had become her undoing. Her career as a realtor, too, took a hit. Clients, especially in a small town where reputations mattered, began to shy away. People preferred to avoid the taint of scandal, choosing other realtors, other council members, other anything to avoid association. David, of course, also suffered. His name, once synonymous with successful local campaigns, was now mud. His reputation as a reliable campaign manager was shattered. He moved out of town, I heard, unable to face the professional ostracization and social shame that had become his constant companion. I observed these ripple effects from a distance, a grim sense of justice settling over me. The affair hadn't just destroyed my marriage, it had unraveled lives, shredded careers, and cast long shadows over futures. Everyone had paid a price, a heavy collateral damage of infidelity that extended far beyond the initial act. Sometimes seeing Karen's diminished public presence, Hearing how her career had faltered, a flicker of empathy would surface. The once vibrant, ambitious woman was now a shadow of her former self, her confidence visibly shaken. But that empathy was quickly overshadowed by the lingering pain of my own betrayal, the years of deceit, the profound disrespect. The wound was still too fresh, too deep. I found myself grappling with a persistent bitterness, a low hum beneath the surface of my daily life. The challenge of rebuilding felt immense. I had the house, the financial security, but the emptiness in the rooms often mirrored an emptiness inside me. Winning the divorce hadn't erased the pain, hadn't filled the void. It had only concluded a chapter, leaving me standing on unfamiliar ground. A few weeks after moving, I started therapy. It felt foreign, unnatural at first, talking to a stranger about the wreckage of my life. But gradually, slowly, the talking helped. It made me recognize the true emotional toll the entire ordeal had taken on me, the grief I hadn't allowed myself to feel while focused on the fight. The therapist, a quiet woman with kind eyes, helped me see that holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I began to understand that true healing lay not in holding on to the bitterness, not in continuing to tally the costs of Karen's betrayal, but in letting go. Letting go of the anger, the blame, the need for further retribution. It was a long road, I knew, but it was the only way forward. The new apartment was smaller, a two-bedroom unit on the third floor of a brick building near the university. It lacked the sprawling space of the house, the yard, the garage. Here, the walls were a neutral beige, the view a cluster of other brick buildings in a sliver of distant sky. It was functional, practical, without any of the lingering ghosts that had haunted the previous home. There were no shared memories in these rooms, only the quiet hum of a new, solitary existence. I threw myself into my work. Network engineering offered a kind of solace. The logical order of it, the clear problems and definable solutions, provided a stark contrast to the emotional chaos that had consumed my personal life. Debugging code, optimizing systems, designing new architectures. These tasks required focus, precision. They were predictable, tangible. It was a distraction, yes, but also a reaffirmation that some things in life still made sense. My therapist, Dr. Albright, had encouraged me to rediscover old hobbies, things I'd let lapse during the years of marriage, when Karen's demanding schedule and my own quiet retreat had left little room for personal pursuits. I dug out my old guitar from the back of a closet. The strings were dusty, the fretboard unfamiliar beneath my fingers. I started with simple chords, scales, the sound a little rusty at first, but slowly the muscle memory returned. I also picked up a few woodworking tools, spent some evenings in the small spare room, sanding, shaping, creating small, unassuming objects. There was a quiet satisfaction in working with my hands, in seeing something form from raw material. Another suggestion from Dr. Albright led me to the local animal shelter. I started volunteering on Saturday mornings, walking mows, playing with cats, cleaning cages. The animals offered a kind of unconditional presence, a simple need for care and affection that asked for nothing complicated in return. There was a quiet joy in it, a sense of purpose that didn't involve strategy or compromise, just straightforward kindness. I also began to reestablish connections with old friends, some of whom had drifted away over the years. Mike, a colleague from a previous job, and I started meeting for coffee once a week. Jim, a college friend I hadn't seen in ages, called me out of the blue. We grabbed a beer, talked about everything and nothing. It felt good to laugh again, to share a meal with someone who knew me from before, who didn't look at me with pity or judgment. The quiet companionship was a balm. One afternoon, picking up groceries, I ran into Brenda Miller in the produce aisle. "Hank, hey," she said, a genuine smile on her face. "How are you doing?" We talked for a few minutes about work, about the weather, about the mundane details of life. She didn't pry, didn't mention Karen, just offered a casual, friendly conversation. It was a small thing, but it reminded me of the ease of genuine connection, of interactions not weighed down by expectation or past trauma. Slowly, gradually, the sharp edges of the anger and hurt began to soften. The constant ache gave way to a melancholic acceptance. The therapist helped me peel back the layers to process the betrayal, not as a singular defining event, but as one painful chapter in a larger story. I began to look at my own part in the marriage's decline too. I wasn't responsible for Karen's choices, but I acknowledged my own imperfections, my tendency to withdraw, my quiet distance that perhaps had contributed to the space she felt she needed to fill. It wasn't about blame, it was about understanding, about taking responsibility for my own actions or inactions. Forgiveness started to emerge, not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet internal shift. Forgiving Karen not because I condoned what she did, but because holding on to the bitterness was only hurting me. And forgiving myself for the mistakes I'd made, for the pain I'd endured, for staying in a marriage that had been dying long before I knew it. It was a release, a lightening of the load. After several months, Dr. Albright suggested I might be ready to start dating again. The idea felt daunting, almost absurd, but with a cautious optimism, I signed up for an online service. First dates were awkward, tentative conversations over coffee or a quiet dinner. I was wary, of course, the scars of betrayal still fresh enough to make me guarded. But there was also a flicker of hope, a desire for genuine companionship, for a connection built on something real. I recognize now, more than ever, the non-negotiable importance of communication, of trust, of mutual respect in any partnership. These weren't just abstract concepts. They were the very bedrock of a life together. The scars of that time remained, subtle lines etched onto my experience. They didn't define me, though. They were reminders, hard-won lessons, of resilience and the quiet strength it took to rebuild a life from rubble. The seasons turned, then years. 3, 4, 5. The sharp edges of the past had softened, blurred by time and the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt. My apartment, once a stark symbol of solitude, now felt like home. The beige walls had seen a few new prints, a comfortable armchair, a shelf of books that reflected new interests. My routine was quiet, predictable, and in its predictability, I found a kind of peace. Work remained a constant, the logic of networks a soothing counterpoint to the messy unpredictability of human emotion. News of Karen filtered through occasionally like distant radio static. She'd moved a few towns over, a place where her past on the city council wasn't a shadow over every interaction. She was working as a consultant now, I heard, her public life a thing of the past, reduced to a faded footnote in local history. David, too, had reportedly moved, attempting to restart his career out west, a fresh start far from the lingering whispers and judgments of our small corner of the Midwest. Life, I realized, was cyclical. People changed, moved on, sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity, leaving behind indelible marks but also clearing the way for what came next. I still appreciated my solitude, the quiet evenings with my guitar or a good book, but I had also found companionship again. Sarah. She was a librarian, a gentle soul with a quiet laugh and an appreciation for the simple things. Our relationship was built on a foundation of open communication and an unspoken understanding of past hurts. There was a genuine respect, a mutual ease that had been absent for so long. She wasn't Karen, and that was precisely the point. She was someone new, someone real. The memory of Karen and of our marriage had receded. It was no longer a raw wound that flared with every passing thought, but a distant ache, a part of my history, like an old scar that occasionally twinged in damp weather. It was a testament to the bitter lesson I had learned about appearances versus reality, about the fragile nature of trust, and the devastating impact of betrayal. I no longer looked at it with overwhelming anger, but with a melancholic acceptance. It had happened. It had shaped me, and I had survived it. My journey had ingrained in me a dedication to living authentically, to valuing honesty and genuine connection above all else. The masks people wore, the roles they played, I saw them more clearly now, and I chose not to participate in the charade. I sought relationships, friendships, and experiences that were grounded in truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might sometimes be. This path had led me to a deeper understanding of myself, of my own resilience, and of what truly mattered in the quiet pursuit of a life well lived. I stand now at my apartment window, looking out over the familiar Midwestern landscape. A quiet street, lined with mature oak trees, their branches bare against the winter sky. A few cars pass, their tires crunching on the cold asphalt. The sun is low, painting the clouds in shades of muted orange and gray. I am not triumphant in any grand, declarative sense. There was no winning. Not really, not in the way one wins a game. But I am resilient. I weathered the storm. I picked up the pieces, slowly, meticulously, and I found my footing again on this quiet stretch of earth. My journey, I know, illustrates that enduring human capacity for survival, for picking up the pieces, and for moving forward, even after the deepest betrayals. It's a quiet testament to the enduring human spirit, a story not of revenge, but of finding a way back to oneself.